Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Oh, I have to hold it. Oh, that's for the broadcast. Hi. Your voice is the broadcast. All right. Thank you for coming. This is our first lectures in the LTU CoAD's lecture series. Our first guest is Purva Chawla. She is the founder and creator of the design consultancy focused on materials called Material Driven. They started in London and they recently relocated to Dallas. And she's going to talk a little bit about her career journey and how she started a material-based consultancy.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't need this.
Yes, I don't need that. All right, guys, let me know if you can't hear me at any point. Just raise your hand and then I know I should talk louder. Thanks so much, everyone, for having me here today. It's a real pleasure. So what I'm hoping to do with you guys today is kind of look at two different things in this presentation. The first, of course, share a little bit with you about my own journey with materials, why the fascination and the interest in the potential here, tell you a little bit about what material driven is, the kind of projects that we do, and then I'm going to shift gears a little bit to the materials toolkit. And by that I mean how the knowledge and access to materials can help you create better design. Not just design that looks and feels great, but design that can actually have a significant impact on the larger challenges that we're facing as a global community today. So hopefully the second half of the presentation will be real takeaways for you, things you can actually apply in your projects, just knowledge, and hopefully some great material examples that you can directly feed into what you're working on right now. And if you have time at the end, we're really hoping you guys can all come up here, pick up some of these materials. It's a very small segment of our library, but hopefully it's just a great trigger to get you guys thinking. So a very quick introduction to me. I'm Purva Chawla, as Noor introduced. I started my professional journey practicing as an architect in Pittsburgh, in India before that, and then I moved to Dallas. Somewhere along that time, when I was living in the land of AutoCAD, I had a moment where I just felt I was very removed from one of the reasons why I got into the field, and that was the tactility and the sensory potential of buildings and spaces. I realized I had a great interest in materials. I'd done a couple of design competitions that were all driven by that aspect, and I wanted to stop and take stock of things and say, okay, where does my interest lie? So I stopped, took a moment, and then in 2016, Material Driven was born. At the time, it was very much an online platform. You could call it a blog. It was this platform where we, through articles and interviews, we really spotlighted on designers who were being innovative both in the manufacturing and use of materials. So it was this open source kind of platform. The articles were really long and detailed, but they really served the design community, and we were starting to see a lot of great interest. And all throughout, the idea was to expose the processes behind these materials. So not just see the finished products, but expose them in such a way so that if young designers such as yourself were looking at these articles or interviews, you might find some techniques in there that you could take away for yourselves. As the content on this platform grew, so did our network and relationships. And I think we started to build a real community around us. And it was a community of who we like to think of now as material developers. So people who have a real interest in tweaking, adjusting, maybe inventing new materials. And we were starting to form this community around us. At the time, a lot of our efforts were focused on publications and events. We hadn't started to get into build projects, but on the left is a wonderful publication that we actually did with Noor's company, Form & Seek. It was for Milan Design Week, and it focused on the innovation that was emerging from a collective, Form & Seek. And then on the right-hand side, this is an event that we did about materials and the circular economy at the London Design Festival. So very much there was a lot of conversation and a lot of writing and publication, which I think it was the great thing to do at that time. But then it started to feed into how we evolved. So in 2017, I had an opportunity to move to the UK. I met my business partner, Adele. She was coming to the world of materials from fashion and product development. She'd worked for Zara. She'd worked kind of in fast fashion, and she was feeling some of the emotions that I was feeling, but from a different lens. She was coming from fashion and wanting to both, I think, source and apply materials in a different way. She'd also worked for one of the oldest material libraries in London at the time, and it was very serendipitous that we met. So at this time, we realized we had a shared mission. We wanted to be more involved in the implementation of advanced and sustainable materials, and we wanted to directly help the entities behind them, especially emerging designers, not just the large manufacturers whose products are so easy to buy off the shelf or who have the means. We wanted to help these younger designers who were creating really exciting products, but they didn't necessarily have that conduit. We wanted to become that conduit. So that was the motivation. And then a third idea was that we wanted to have a physical repository of materials, because every time we talk to people about materials, everybody's like, yeah, I kind of get what you're saying, but it becomes real when you actually see these, when you touch and feel them. That's when it all becomes real, especially for larger companies who want to turn those, who want to change how they make products. Seeing these is a very dramatic catalyst for them. So we wanted to build a physical collection. So that kind of shared mission is sort of helped shape where we are today. And I'll tell you a little bit about the types of projects that we do, but I think that mission has basically driven our evolution to become a true company and a business. We like to define ourselves as a design agency and a materials library, because the library is a core component of what we have. We have an office in London, as Noor said, and now we have one in Texas, Dallas/Austin. I'll let you guys know when it becomes Austin. And we have one segment of the materials library in both locations, so that we're able to serve a community in both areas. So I think what we do can kind of be classified under three neat categories, one being education, which I think is really driven by the dissemination of knowledge, helping people understand advanced materials and how students, professional brands, and large companies can use that knowledge to their advantage to create better products. So as part of that educational division of our work, we do a lot of talks and workshops, and often we work with universities, museums, we work with a lot of consumer brands, educating them. And the subjects can be really, really diverse. They can range from plastics to biomaterials. We can do workshops about health and well-being. That's something that we found as the interest grows, the kind of content that we end up focusing on really varies depending on the audience. So on the left is a really cool workshop that we actually did for the Woolmark Performance Challenge. I don't know if you guys have heard about this. This is a challenge for university students. It was launched 2 years ago by the Woolmark company and Adidas. And it's essentially asking designers to look at a material like merino wool in the context of active wear or sportswear. So it's actually a really cool challenge. I'd encourage you to check it out. What we were asked to do was to come in at an interesting moment where they had a small group of finalists for the challenge. They'd flown them into London, and they wanted them to sort of break free from all their preconceptions, all of their previous designs, and re-look at the materiality of merino wool. So this whole workshop on the left, everything focused on wool. Of course, merino wool is expensive, so we worked with a lot of regular other varieties of wool. But we got them thinking about how something as soft as wool could be turned into a hard composite. It could be turned into a number of different things. But that was an interesting focus for us and a real example of something very tailor-made to that challenge. On the right is a workshop that we did at the Design Museum in London, and it was all about biomaterials. And we used everything from fruit and peel waste to grain waste, and it was used to create these composites. And you can see right here from the edge of that photograph over there that there's quite a lot of detail you can accomplish with something such as a food waste-based material. So that was an interesting learning experience for us, and all the workshop attendees really enjoyed working and turning banana peels into something as beautiful as that. That's good. So a second dimension of our work is curation, and I think to a great extent, it's about creating exceptional exhibitions, installations, and immersive experiences. So in this situation, what we're trying to do is bring materials to people in a really interesting way, and different situations, and hopefully that helps to more education, implementation, and kind of challenges what their previous perceptions are. So our clients have ranged from museums to architectural studios and trade shows. That's a very interesting growing market there. So this is an example of a project that we really enjoyed doing. So it's a geodesic dome as you can see. It's about 3.5 meters high and 7 meters wide, and every material or every triangular panel in the dome is another material. So we love working on this, and an added sort of brief that we had when we were asked to create this for the Baltic Center was that every material had to have a relationship to the northern UK. And why northern UK? Do any of you guys know that North UK was the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution? So this is an interesting, kind of segment of the UK. Lots of great history. Obviously, this history of the revolution, the Industrial Revolution. But today, it's the home of where graphene was invented. So they've had this whole, many years of innovation, and they asked us to represent that through materials. And every panel in here had to come from someone, either a manufacturer or a designer who was in northern UK. So that was an interesting challenge. But I think we took it on. We had materials as diverse as tweed. We had mushroom mycelium panels in there. We had graphene. We had parametric wool weaves. And they were all from amazing designers up north. So I think it was a really great project. And it made a lot of different people aware of what the region had to offer, and it actually forged some partnerships between them. So just for scale, I added this picture for fun. You can see how big one triangle is. It's about as high as us, and that's my business partner, so she was pretty much the same height as the panel. So it was interesting for us to work at this scale. Really enjoyable project. And we worked with about 50 different designers and manufacturers, ranging from the company that produces Perspex acrylic in the north to a company that's been around for, at this point, 150 years producing tweed. So really great diversity of materials in here. And then another type of curatorial project that we do, and some may find it uninteresting, but it's actually a great challenge, is trade shows. So conferences and trade shows are always looking to have one element in the show that kind of breaks free from all the commercial barriers that the individual stands have and offer something that's truly educational and inspirational. And for some reason, we are the right fit for that. And we enjoy working in that context. So here we have an example of an exhibition that we did earlier this year in London. And we included a number of both inspiring sort of, I would say, startup or emerging materials, but a lot of commercially viable materials as well. And we like to create these displays where people just stop and spend 30 minutes looking at something. They walk away with 5 things that they want to implement in their project right now. Or maybe there's 2 or 3 things that they really want to look into further as a theme for research. But that's what we want to do. We want people to stop and just spend a long time there and walk away with a great deal of knowledge and potential for their own work. So this is us. We're already working on the next iteration of this show, and it's all going to be about sensory design. Another example of a similar work, this was just last month at 100% Design in London. And here we created a mini studio environment where we wanted it to be more exploratory, less formal and finished, and we wanted people to pick up things and question them, maybe even look at 2 materials together. So it was a true studio environment in many ways. And we had materials from the architecture, packaging, and interiors industry on show. This is a bit of a close-up. So that's kind of how some of these materials look up close, or the display looks up close. And I've also included an image of the type of labels we have up there. So they're not conventional labels. We like to tell a bit of a story. There's about 300 words about each material. We also talk about the scale. So if you were to look at these materials and a label next to it, you'd know that this is something that's not commercially being produced right now, or you would know that it's being produced right now, but it's got like a 20-week lead time. We like to declare that at the outset so people have that awareness. And we also talk a lot about the application and characteristics. So, it's a very informative sort of narrative way of conveying these materials. And the type of materials in there can really vary from bioplastics, which is kind of up left over there, to paint that absorbs pollution. And then finally, the image up here in the corner is of a marine seawall tile that's designed to actually attract microbic life rather than fight it. So do you guys know that the current way of creating seawalls, it's like a flat slope. If you've ever seen a seawall, the idea is to resist microbic life. It's a very hard line, but that doesn't work because when you shut out microbic life, you're also preventing the water from being purified, and you are over time damaging the natural, the identity of the water. But so this is a designer in Australia, and he actually works with the Sydney Institute of Marine Sciences, and he's come up with this beautiful 3D printed tile and they're deploying it in the hundreds now across the harbor, and they've got sponsorship from Volvo. So I think it's a really great concept of something small that's been deployed at a large scale, and it's creating a lot of impact, but it's attracting microbic life. And then finally, you could call this the bread and butter. This is how and why we're able to run as a company. There's the consulting. So here we work with clients as diverse as architecture and design studios, consumer goods brands, developers, hotel chains. And our role is to provide intelligence about these materials, and also to guide and manage the actual execution and implementation of these materials in projects. So we don't just hand off that knowledge. Sometimes we set up introductions. Sometimes we actually are involved from the concept to the fabrication to the delivery, but this is where we actually help bridge that gap from the material developer to the material user. So this is an interesting project. I mentioned the Woolmark Performance Challenge. So the other thing that we did for them as our clients was to help them design a trophy for the first award. You'll notice that the award is really small. I think it's definitely smaller than any average award size. And this is because it's made out of a biomaterial that's made from potato waste. So it's a great material. It's got a lot of great buzz about it right now. But one of the things to learn about biomaterials is that they behave in unexpected ways. So when we were baking this trophy, it shrunk. So just lots of it truly shrunk. And they were, I have to say, I really applaud them. They were amazing about it. They said, this is a sustainably made trophy. We're going to put it out there. And that's all there is to it. So having said that, this year's trophy is much larger, and it has been fabricated, and it's showing no sign of shrinkage. So it's made out of a material called solid wool, and it's actually very emblematic of what Woolmark stands for. So if you look at the back of your sweaters, you'll notice it'll say Woolmark certified. So Woolmark is the entity that that certifies something as natural merino wool or qualities or gradients of wool. And for them, this challenge is really emblematic of a change and innovation with a very traditional and old material. So for them to have a trophy, it really needs to reflect that ethos, but also be sustainable, biodegradable, and that's what this material is. It's natural wool with bioresin, and I'll talk about this up ahead. But this is the kind of interesting projects that we do. What we do can range from something super small, like that trophy, to something at the architectural scale, which I'm going to talk about next. So another recent and very interesting project for us has been our client was a British brand that creates cleaning and bath products. Their mission for the next 5 years is to get rid of plastic in their packaging entirely. That's actually their product. I wiped out the logo. What we did for them was we embarked on a 4 to 6 week kind of roughly intelligence exercise. We helped them identify both approachable and really sort of far-fetched solutions where they could put their bath products into innovative packaging. And then within the next 5 years, they could actually start to phase out and eventually eliminate plastic. So it was a very interesting project. And one of the examples, this is definitely on the out there side, that we pitched to them was a material called Not PLA. If you follow the story, they're also known as Uhu. You've definitely seen videos online of people popping the Uhu capsules, marathon runners. It's essentially, it's a shell of a brown seaweed-based material, and it is fairly resilient for how fragile it looks. It's able to hold liquids inside it, and it's currently in an edible format. So that's how it biodegrades or it can be consumed. Obviously, our client will not be looking at an edible version of their bath product packaging. So that's kind of the next frontier, working it out with them. But this is just kind of to tell you that the companies whose products you're using today are really looking at solutions like this. They're looking at these cutting edge materials that are being used in the food industry, for the cosmetics industry. They're looking at them as really true, like serious solutions for their manufacturing processes. And this is what we did with them. Another ongoing project, kind of at the architectural scale, our client is the AC Hotel by Marriott in DC. And here, what we're doing takes on a very different form. It's actually at the intersection of art and permanent architectural or interior installations. And our role is to both design, source, and deliver these permanent installations, all made from unique materials, of course. So we're working with about 3 to 5 different artists and fabricators, and we're creating these sort of moments around the hotel where materials are translated into art and installations, and they'll sort of stop people in their tracks, but they also will educate them about the material at hand. The image on the right shows some of the materials that we're working with. There's ceramic, metallic tiles, small units. And right here is what that actually turns into. So if anyone can recognize some icons in there. Anyone see the White House, maybe there? Yeah. You see, yes, exactly. You see the memorial, but the monument. Well, so this is the kind of, I think this is definitely a different spectrum of our work where we cross over into art, but where a single unit, which is like that ceramic tile, and the fabricators who we rely on, we're using them to create these installations and experiences. And then the other image on here is actually one module of a 79 unit chandelier that we've created for them, and it's all handmade paper and optic fibers. So it's definitely a very exciting realm. We're looking forward to doing more projects like this because we're able to touch so many people's lives. There is an opportunity to work with clients in the hospitality and and interior sectors and inject more sustainable and innovative materials. And yeah, the hotel is opening in December, so we should have more photos to be able to disclose, but at that time. All right, finally, the last type of consulting project that we've recently worked on is with a technical materials company. This is actually a really cool resource for you guys. So this is a company called Goodfellow. They're actually one of the world's largest supplier of technical materials. And by that, I mean these are advanced materials that have till now been used by the science and tech sectors, but also they've been used a lot by researchers. But so far, designers really haven't used these materials, which is why they came to us. They asked us to become the conduit to young designers, to design professionals and architecture professionals, because they really wanted that more people see the potential of these really advanced materials beyond the science and tech sectors. So this is a view of a website that we helped them develop. It's called the Materials Hub. You can just click on materialshub.com, and it has a great deal of information about these individual materials. They can range from ceramic forms to tantalum and titanium foils. And judging by the image on the right, you're going to see that those super technical materials on the left have actually been turned into really, really beautiful pieces of furniture, lighting, art, wallpaper. So there's just a wealth of possibilities here in their materials, and we're helping them find and highlight that. So this is definitely an interesting journey. We've been working with them for about a year now, and it's an interesting intersection between the science and tech sectors and then onward to designers and helping them bridge that gap. All right, yeah, so this is some of the cool entities that we've had a chance to work with as clients, as partners. And I think the sort of landscape of who these brands and entities are points to how interdisciplinary the field of materials really is and how far-reaching the impact is. So it's been a pleasure to work with these folks. All right, now getting to the part that directly concerns you guys, some great takeaways, things you can actually go and feed back into your projects. So the idea of a materials toolkit is, I think, the first question, of course, is why materials? Why are we talking about materials at all today? And why are they relevant? And to that, I think the most obvious reason is that especially today, as the number of new inventions, whether it's products or materials, are being invented and evolved, there's just it's like a staggering volume of products being invented today and staggering volume of innovation in materials. And I think that's happening because materials have the potential to tackle so many different challenges. They can address these challenges from our increasing need for health and well-being in our interior spaces and outdoors. They're able to insulate us from pollution, and they're being designed more and more for keeping the end of life in mind. So there's just a great number of, I would say, challenges and concerns that we're facing today that materials are able to tackle. I'm going to touch upon each one of these in more detail, but this is just a glimpse at how materials can correlate to all of them and help solve larger problems. Not only that, I think materials are able to respond effectively to rapidly changing consumer trends and demanding consumer trends, help create more sensory and inclusive design that accounts for all kinds of users. And materials are able to help us fold in really advanced ways of fabrication now. So that's kind of, again, that conduit between new fabrication and technology and users, and materials are that bridge. And I'm going to, again, touch upon these in greater detail, but something to think about, that these are the many, many dimensions that materials are going to allow you to tackle. To me, this is a really great quote that extends beyond the design world. It tells you that beyond just interesting products and interiors, there's an economic value to materials. And the Future of Materials Summit, which was actually the first of its kind that was done by The Economist in 2017, really highlighted that. And they talked about how nothing is going to impact us more than the materials that manufacturers use. And they actually kind of put it on par with robotics and 3D printing. Really, all of those innovations that we're counting on today, they actually put materials even ahead of that. So something to think about, that there is this greater economic impact, this widespread manufacturing potential, and why materials do matter in this context. To give you a short description of the material you see here, this is Zoa. It's by a company called Modern Meadow, and it's actually the world's first true bioleather. So you've definitely heard bioleather used in many different contexts, but Zoa is probably the first true bioleather, and that's because it's actually made from collagen, which is what leather has traditionally been made of, except this is collagen that comes from yeast. So they re-engineer the DNA of yeast to produce collagen, and that collagen is kind of grown into a specific shape, leaving no room for wastage, with definitely less resources, water than traditional leather is, traditional leather production. So it's a very sustainable and forward-thinking way of producing leather. And at the same time, it's interesting to note that the creation of this bioleather, which has accelerated quite a lot in the last 2 years, relies on technology from the beer industry. So it's definitely representative of a very interdisciplinary field that that material making is right now, and the intersection of different industries that is causing this. So hopefully this kind of starts to help you think about why materials. So I think central to the idea of why materials are important is who is the material maker. And I think this is a uniquely positioned and uniquely skilled entity. More and more, as we're engaging with young designers who are fresh graduates, startups, established businesses, we're noticing some traits that unite them. The people who are inventing these new materials are united by some traits, and we like to think of them as a material maker. So this is our definition, purely based from tons and tons of interactions with these designers. And according to us, a material maker is an innovator who works across disciplines. So they're thinking about design, science, technology, but they're also thinking about culture. They're also thinking about community. And one of the USPs really is that they're unrestricted by norms that larger entities are defined by. So they're kind of pushing past those boundaries, and they're blurring interdisciplinary boundaries, but they're also producing in ways that their predecessors haven't, and they're sort of, I would say that they're unrestricted in their fabrication and design techniques. So let's think about some of the challenges that we mentioned, some of the things that materials and innovative materials in particular can tackle. I want to go over them one by one and show you guys some really great examples that highlight how those materials are tackling problems. The first is this idea of resource scarcity. So how many of you guys know what type of sand is used in construction today? Anyone? What type of sand do we use? Any clues? Yeah?
No, it came up in my head because my father works in construction.
Ah, nice. All right. Well, yeah.
Could it just be ground up concrete?
No, it's all river sand. It's all like really high quality river sand. And that means that with the scale of construction that we're doing, we're depleting our reserves of river sand, whereas desert sand, which is much finer and of course in abundance, it just can't be used because it's super, super fine. It's not suitable for construction. It's not suitable for a number of different applications. So this is a group of designers who actually wanted to tackle that potential resource scarcity and suggest a solution that could respond to that. So finite has come up with this idea of a biodegradable binder that will prevent firing and that'll prevent masonry from being created in a very traditional way. So they use desert sand, this biodegradable binder, and they come up with a material that's actually as strong as concrete, but it can be ground up at the end of its life and then used again. So I think an interesting solution where it's tackling this future resource scarcity that's definitely inevitable, and they are suggesting a solution that's low energy, I think sensitive to our, our energy needs, and it is just as strong. So interesting solution there. With material scarcity, it's inevitable that we're talking about energy scarcity, right? We've been talking about solar energy for a long time and widely using it, but at a really small, minute materials level. This is actually a very simple and effective solution. You guys can have a look at this later. So it's a company based in Italy. They're called Luce Dentro. And what Luce Dentro has done is that they've invented an ink, a photoluminescent ink that can be embedded in a number of different glass formats. So from tiles to bricks to small pebbles that can be put on the sides of roads or paths. And what the ink really does is it absorbs solar energy during the day and it glows gently at night. While it may seem small and aesthetic, they're actually working on turning this particular ink and technology into basically street lighting, because then the less energy we devote to street lighting, the more energy we have for our other needs. And in general, it's just a really great solution that can go from this small size to something really large and widespread, and really applicable for an urban design context as well. So I want to talk about mounting waste. We're all looking at these completely terrifying images of plastic all the time. But there are a number of different forms and different sources of waste, some that we're not even always aware of. One of them is algal blooms. So our waterways, our rivers, they experience a great deal of algal bloom. It's a sign of bad health of the water. And nothing is really done when that algal bloom is skimmed off. It's a toxic material, it's harmful. But this is a company, they're based in Boston. Bloom Foam has come up with a way to turn that algal bloom that's harvested from water bodies and turn it into a really spongy and resilient foam. So the foam is being used right now by the sportswear industry, in footwear. They've done a number of collaborations with familiar brands. And essentially the process is they extract the green algal bloom that floats above waterways. They dry it out and then they flocculate it, which means they pump air into it and then you end up with foam like that. In 100% honesty, they've declared that this is only about 60% of the foam, and then there is about 40% synthetic ingredients, but they're working on increasing that percentage more and more. And it's a great step of turning something really ugly and potentially toxic into something really useful. Speaking of strange waste, we've got something that's made from chicken feathers. Obviously, we know that certain types of bird feathers make their way into quilts and infills of many kinds, but chicken feathers are never used. They're invariably burned, landfill. I think the disposal is not a simple process. So Aero Powder, which is a company that started off in London, has come up with a way for turning that chicken feather waste into a thermal packaging material. And this is because there is a natural thermal insulating property that the chicken feathers have. So they've capitalized on that, and they've actually sealed off the chicken feathers in this wonderful bioplastic film, because clearly people did not like to be touching chicken feathers up close. That was a bit obvious for them, although they did start off with a version where it was directly on the surface. The second iteration is with bioplastic films, and it's actually really effective. So people can send materials that need to keep cool, products, cheese, wine, stuff like that. You're able to package it in this biodegradable thermal packaging material, and they're replacing styrofoam, which is, of course, we know the consequences of styrofoam and using it at a wide scale. This is something that maybe Amazon should take notice of. We're hoping. All right. Air pollution. Sorry. Right there. So we know about air pollution. I know depending on where you live, what part of the world someone lives, the air pollution levels can be drastically different. I grew up in New Delhi, and there's certain times of the year where you're advised to not even just step out of the house at certain times of the day, because the air pollution is completely staggering. Cities like Beijing, New Delhi, Krakow have some of the worst metrics in pollution. So then what if that pollution can actually become a resource for us? As designers, that's such an exciting proposition. And there are a number of designers. I'm going to show you guys 2 examples. I would say there's two schools of thought. Some designers who are actually capturing that pollution and turning it into a useful material, or there's designers who are actively intervening where pollution would have been released into the atmosphere, and they're again turning that into a useful material. So this is made of air. It's by a company called Elegant Embellishments. They're architecture grads from the US, now in Berlin. And they found a way to turn biochar, which is organic matter that's burnt. They found a way that when that biochar is burnt, rather than letting all that carbon dioxide escape into the atmosphere, they would actually capture it by pyrolysis. They would condense it and they would turn it into a very thermoplastic, wonderful material with a biobinder, of course. And that's actually super suitable for things like facades. So these are facade panels that they've come up with. They also have interior surfaces for counters, also for products. It's just a really versatile material, and it's essentially just burnt pyrolyzed biomatter and pollution. This is another interesting invention, again the same way, but a different way or a different point where they intervene. So Air Ink has that same intention to capture, but it works as an individual unit, which means they've invented a contraption called CarLink. And that's attached at the back of car exhaust pipes or factory exhausts, and those individual units are able to capture all the pollution and ink. And when they capture that, they're able to condense it again and turn it into this really rich black water-based pigment. So right now they've worked on these markers, but the next step is to turn this into large cartridges for printing companies, for packaging entities, for branding, and they're definitely there where they're producing the ink in large quantities, because obviously there's more than enough pollution to go around. Sad reality there. So that's the kind of pollution that we've all seen. We know about air pollution, but what about the pollution that we never get to see? We are using aluminum on a daily basis in all kinds of products, but did you guys know that when you're extracting aluminum, especially at the sites of extraction, there's just a huge volume of something called red mud that's created. So if you were to look at a refinery or an extraction facility from Google Earth, you'd see these landscapes of red, like literally red earth. And that material is toxic. Addressing it is a challenge and expensive. So I think it's interesting that this group of designers came up with a way to use that red mud or I would say industry residue into something useful. So red mud is actually wonderful almost as a substitute for ceramics. So they've created these beautiful ceramic vessels, but it's also an interesting geopolymer that could potentially be used for concrete or a substitute for concrete. So it's a really versatile material, and it's considered highly toxic until you treat it or bake it in a certain way, but just kind of displays the potential of looking at pollution through a different lens. Okay. We're seeing a lot of talk about health and well-being these days. We're talking about health and well-being, particularly in the context of indoor environments where we don't want our surfaces to have harmful coatings. We don't want them to release VOCs. We want to have the same capabilities as the materials we've always used, but we want them to be free of something negative, right, and damaging. We also are looking for materials that have a positive impact on us, that's healing, that connects us to nature, that has all those qualities. So the whole movement towards health and well-being and our expectations from design and materials, it's just accelerating at a really rapid pace. I think this is a great example of a material that has all those qualities. I'll hold it up so you guys can see it. So it's called acoustic pulp. It's by a Swedish company called Box. It took me a long time to pronounce it right. I was saying it wrong for a while. But Box have found a way to turn waste wood from Swedish forests and then combining it with a few natural ingredients, which I'll show you right here. So the ingredients are essentially shredded wool, shredded fruit peels, and wheat bran. And that's all there is really. So there's no other synthetic ingredients. This is a material that's flame retardant. It's acoustic. It's 10,000 times stronger than paper. It has all the qualities that we need from an acoustic surface, but it's entirely natural and it's free from any kind of toxic coating or even adhesive. So I think this is an example of how we can meet those needs for health and well-being while never sacrificing anything that we need in terms of performance or strength. An interesting anecdote about this, when you guys come up close, you can see the little specks in here. So if you wanted to change the color of this material from white to become like a dark beige, all you would do is vary the percentage of wheat bran. So it's wheat bran that gives it the color, and if you had 30% wheat bran, it would look different. And if you had 10%, it would look different. So a nice way to remove synthetic colorants entirely. Speaking of health and well-being, we've also got materials today that are actively drawing out pollutants from indoor air. So this is a great material. It's called the Breath, and it can be used all over interior environments. It could be used for art, signage, upholstery, furniture, curtains, stuff like that. And essentially what it's doing is it's pulling away toxic molecules from the air, and then it's breaking them down within the shell of within the structure of the material, and then it's re-releasing them. So it's essentially purifying the air, and it's not just sort of a functional material that you can't do anything with. You can print on it. It can serve so many different functions. And this is all because it has a 3-layer technology. On the outside is printable surfaces on either side, and on the inside they have a very dense layer of carbon fibers. That's what traps the pollutants, things like VOCs, formaldehyde, and then it breaks them down. So interesting sort of material there that is actively engaging with human health and well-being. So when we talk about health and well-being, why are we only talking about humans? What about other life on Earth? Let's think about other life on Earth, which of course indirectly feeds back into our own health. I love this product and this material also because it has a more inclusive view. It's thinking about the bees. You've definitely heard the news, guys, about the fact that bee populations are dying out. There's many reasons, pesticides, disease, but one of them is the fact that bees have longer and longer distances to move now, which means as we're urbanizing, the distances between the places that the bees can stop and refuel from plants are just getting longer and longer. So they're exhausted. They're dying from exhaustion. So this designer has invented what she calls bee-saving paper. So it's essentially an energy drink for bees. And the concept is if you were a bee, you would be seeing that side. That's what you would see. You'd see the glucose embedded in there. You'd see the UV ink, and the UV ink would attract you to this paper. And as a bee, you would find that you were able to stop there, refuel, take the glucose in, and continue. So it helps with the bee populations. It's actually a very versatile, strong type of paper. So it could be used for things like signage, posters, picnic, cups, things used outdoors, paper bags. So it's very easily deployable in a number of ways, but it is a solution that looks at the health and well-being of bees, and then indirectly that does feed back to us because we're so dependent on bees for all kinds of food production. I want to quickly talk about performance and resilience. I think our expectations from materials have just skyrocketed. We need our products to perform at their very best, be produced at the shortest time possible. We need them to be resilient in these unexpected circumstances of weather, of challenges, of structural breakdown. There's just a lot of expectations. At the same time, we don't want them to pull so much energy during the actual manufacture. So I love this material. It's actually looks very similar. I don't have it here, but it looks very similar to a traditional, coarse type of brick. Kind of looks like this, but it's gray in color. And essentially what they've done with this brick at Biomason is that they've removed entirely the process of firing. So you take a mold, you put the aggregate in it, and then they inject it with bacteria. So it's a special type of bacteria. The bacteria produces a biocement, and the biocement is what aggregates all those different particles together and binds it into something really strong and hard. So you don't have to fire it, which means you don't have that large carbon dioxide footprint, and you have something that's as strong and resilient as needed. Another similar example, very quickly, this is a material by an Israeli design studio called Createra. And they're achieving, again, those similar strengths like other masonry such as concrete, but they're doing it entirely using natural earth, different types of earth, different natural minerals, and then they're using vegetal fibers to create the reinforcement. So something beautiful, something resilient, but entirely natural, and kind of negating some of the negative effects that construction or fabrication has. Design for end of life. I'm sure you guys are talking about designing packaging right now, and how whatever we're using on a daily basis has to be both implemented and designed, keeping in mind what's going to happen at the end of life. Is it going to be recycled? Is it going to be composted? In what conditions does it need to be recycled and composted? So it's a big question right now. This is an example, I think, that's really going to pick up very soon. It's a designer from Chile called Margarita Talep, and she has worked with a certain breed of algae and different percentages of water to create different strengths of this bioplastic. It actually can, in a dry state, it can last up to 6 to 8 months, but at the same time, when you're done with it, it can biodegrade in about 30 days in the soil. So it has some of the essential properties and long life that we need, but it also has some of the great biodegradability that we are looking for right now from packaging. Design for end of life is also about design for disassembly. We're looking at adhesives today that are modeling themselves on a single motto, which is glue like a screw. So what does that mean? Anyone? Any thoughts on what glue like a screw means? Thoughts?
Like you can glue it down, but it can be easily removed without damaging.
Yes, exactly. And that's kind of like the real goal for all kinds of materials that are aiming towards design for disassembly. And this is a collaboration between Ecoute, who already produces a 100% compostable board made from waste fibers, water, pressure, and heat. And they've struck a partnership with a company called DSM Niga that specializes in adhesives. And the result is that this is a compostable board, but when you add a veneer onto it, previously, that would make the entire thing completely unrecyclable or uncompostable, because the veneer can never be separated. That's the whole problem in the furniture industry. That's why we have billions of tons of waste in the furniture industry today, is because the veneer that we so need to protect our surfaces, we can never peel it back from the plywood. So this is a version that can do that, because with the right trigger, the adhesive can be reversed like a screw. It can be peeled back, and then one material can go to the recycler, and one material can either be reused or can go to your composting facility. So it's a great invention. It is 100% commercialized right now. It's being used in the Netherlands. Ecoute is available here in the US. I encourage you to look at it. Great material. I want to very, very quickly, I know sustainability is such a hotly contested topic, so I'll just say a couple of things about it. And that is, I think we need to think about sustainability through the lens of materials. And that's because I know it's such a heavily contested topic. There's a lot of greenwashing. But if we were to consider sustainability through the lens of materials, we have a real opportunity to put things within reach and make them more tangible. So make it clear for us. And I think increasingly, because there's such a call for transparency about products and materials, that actually brings us much closer to sustainability, helping us understand what it can mean. I would say these are really interesting examples of how knowing more about your material choices will help you make better products, and that transparency actually feeds into far more sustainable buildings, consumer goods, all kinds of things. In particular, I want to mention the Declare certification. If you guys haven't seen a Declare label ever before, it has some really unique sections to it. It's hard to point over here with this one, but they have a section that says end of life. So what happens at the end of life? Can it be recycled? How can it be recycled? They also talk about life expectancy. So these are categories that like labels have never had before. Like you've never looked at a product and had these categories on them before and known so much. So knowledge, transparency about your material and its ingredients is going to feed into a better vision and a better version of sustainability. And another idea is that sustainability doesn't have to be what we've always expected it to be. We've always talked about sustainability as being meeting our needs for the present without sacrificing the needs of the future, but maybe that's just somewhere in the middle. If you look up here, it's actually right in the middle. It's a point of neutrality, which just isn't enough. A lot of people are advocating for the fact that the true sustainability is regenerative behavior, which means choosing to make things or invent materials or products in such a way that you actually give back to the environment, or you give back to the community. So you actually put yourself in the positive. And I think, again, looking at design through this lens and material choices through this lens is a really great way to make something sustainable, whatever it is, whether it's a system, an individual product, anything. So, and then there's new technology and new ways of making. There's a lot of buzz right now about mycelium, right? So much buzz about mycelium. And if you don't know what mycelium is, it's the vegetative root of a mushroom. And it's being used to create packaging, lighting, lamps, furniture, acoustic panels such as the one seen here. And it's a really great technology because not only is it great for using a substrate like wood waste to grow on and to grow in a specific mold, it's a naturally flame retardant material, it's insulating, and there's actually a lot of talk about how mycelium can consume plastic. So mycelium could be our path to actually digesting all this plastic waste that we have. So I think materials, again, offer that way of really absorbing all this great technology, especially in the field of biodesign and biomaterials, while still creating a really sophisticated end product. All right, what do you guys see here? What does it look like? What's happening to this t-shirt right here? Yes. Oh yeah, it's deteriorating. It's been eaten up by the worms. So this t-shirt is designed to degrade in 12 weeks. It's essentially a blend of pulp eucalyptus, beechwood, and algae that's been grown in a bioreactor. So that unique combination and this idea that this isn't a shirt or a fabric that was made in a mill and then cut and then turned into a t-shirt, this unique fabrication and combination of ingredients makes it truly biodegradable. It is truly worm food in a matter of weeks, which is exciting. You can actually purchase this t-shirt on the WellBeing website, and I'm going to order it next week to test it out. It seems like a really cool technology and something that's actually within reach for all of us. So very quickly, there's just 3 quick points in here, but I think there's a dimension that we have to think about, which is creating experiences. All these problems and challenges are well and good, but you're all designing to create a better experience for users. You're all designing to compete with other products in the market. And this is how materials can actually play a role in shaping and bettering those experiences. We're hearing a lot of buzz about veganism. It's a very strong, I think move as individuals to be vegan, but no, we're not expecting veganism to just be limited to our food choices. We want our materials, our choice of like fabrics, our products, we want everything to meet that ethos. And this is a great example of a vegan leather, which is meeting that need. It's called Malai. It's created from bacterial cellulose and coconut waste. So if you guys have ever seen how coconuts are harvested or have read something about it, when a coconut is harvested into that amazing coconut water that we drink, there's always a little bit of residue left behind in the coconut, and that is highly acidic. And actually, if that acidic residue was released into the soils or the areas where they are harvested, they actually completely damage the soils there. So that's something we never get to see and hear about, but it's ripe for the production of bacterial cellulose and this wonderful bio leather. You guys can come and test it. It's waterproof. It's wonderful, being used for shoes, bags, and it is 100% vegan. So it's PETA approved. And I think this just points to the idea that materials can respond to these trends and this need that we have for products today. We're also looking to redefine how things are detailed. Whether it's the sequins or the seams or the adhesives, we have such high expectations right now from all industries, from the minutest of objects, and I think the sequin is a great example. We need sequins, right? How are we going to have beautiful, I think, evening wear or really aesthetic clothing? But that smallest of units has such a widespread impact that designers are finding new ways of redefining that small unit, the sequin. This is an example of someone in London who found a way to turn wood cellulose, so the bark of a wood, the cellulose inside it, if you treat it a certain way, you actually end up with a natural iridescence that looks like this beautiful sequin. That's what it is, but there's no chemical, no paint at all. A great example of meeting the needs of consumers without compromising some of our needs for sustainability. And then finally, the idea of color. We're talking about paint and pigment that comes from flowers, from leaves, all kinds of different sources. This is one step up. This is paint from bacteria. And what Natsai Cheza at Faber Futures does is she doesn't extract pigment from bacteria and then implement it on something. She actually puts the bacteria and fabric in the same vat, and they co-create. So it's this idea of let's stop thinking of pigment as a linear process where you take ink, you apply it on something. Let's put the paint creators and the painting, the object to be painted in the same vat, and let's end up with beautiful results like this. So interesting response there. Anyone seen this lately? Anyone seen this on their news feed? Ah, nice, okay. Folks have seen it. So it's obviously being touted as this ultimate like ski jacket and ultimate outerwear. It's really waterproof, windproof. It's a really, really strong, resilient jacket. But whether it's for marketing reasons or to really appeal to the sensory potential, they've really worked hard to create an outer skin that appeals to people at a very primal way. They've got this natural iridescence. It's actually designed to mimic the behavior of the black squid and its ability to change color in different circumstances. And I really love how it's been created. There's about 2 billion little glass spheres that were embedded in resin to create this skin. So I think it's an example of something really sensory, and it enhances the appeal. And from a product designer's perspective, I think it has a lot of potential. So sensory design can also be really inclusive to people with different abilities, to people who don't have the gift of sight, or they're challenged in some way, or really to people who are looking for some of the benefits of sensory design, the fact that it can relax us, it can make us feel at ease, it can better our environments. And I think this is a great example. It's called Shore Rugs. It's a woven silicone tubing. It's really flexible and strong. It's highly weatherproof. You can leave it outside for months, years. And up on the screen, you can see a beautifully colored graded material. But one of the USPs of this material is that it's therapeutic. So you could actually come home after a stressful day, press down into it. It's got that, it's got the feeling of a stress ball, but turned into a rug. So there is a way that our choice of materials here, of course, silicone tubing, can appeal to us in so many different ways. Touch our sense of smell, touch, temperature even. We've got to think along that way. And then absolute last thing here, the idea of using materials to reach community and society as a whole. So maybe an invention or a choice of material doesn't have to just touch the one consumer that you have. Maybe by inventing or by using this material, you're able to create a much larger impact. So this is solid wool. Let me quickly pull it up. What these guys did was they took a really hard, wiry wool. This is a wool called the Herdwick wool, which nobody wanted to use in northern UK. And why was this? This was because the wool was really coarse, just an unfriendly wool. Even the carpet making industry didn't want to use this wool as an underlay. So it was being discarded, and it was causing a loss of revenue for the region. So they decided that they were going to run some tests on this, and they found that it had some really great reinforcing properties. They were able to use it almost like fiberglass with a bioresin, and they ended up with this really strong material that can be cast into chairs, 3D products. It can be laser cut, etched. Actually, that trophy I showed you guys right at the beginning, that's made out of solid wool as well. So there's an ability to really create impact at a large scale. They've definitely had a strong positive impact on the area that they live in. Where there was a sort of economic decline, they're seeing a lot of interest. The Herdwick wool has a market now, and it's not just them who's benefiting. It's a whole region where the wool and the wool farmers and the sheep farmers, wool farmers. That's interesting. All right. Another interesting example of a community impact, this is the work of Fernando Lapos. And if you guys know anything about Mexican corn, you'll know that there's hundreds and hundreds of varieties of it in all these beautiful natural colors, and it's a waste product. But he found a way to work with communities in Mexico and to source those corn shells and use marketry techniques to create a really beautiful wall paneling system, furniture, tables. He's done a lot of great things, but again, it's not just a system that helps him in any way. It's actually feeding back into a whole community who's helping him both source and fabricate this marketry system using corn. And yeah, I just want to leave you guys with this, something to think about. Materials are not, it's not a fad, it's not something fun to use, it's not just that. There's a strong business case for using materials, for using innovative materials, for taking a chance if you're a large company or a young designer, whatever position you're in, choosing to use these innovative sort of cutting edge materials. There's a strong business case, especially if they're sort of recyclable. There's, you can get secondary sources of revenue. There's greater productivity. We talked about health and well-being. And as we start to use these materials more, a lot of these are super commercially viable already. But as we start to use them more, we're going to see that the costs are going to get lower and lower, so that by the time you guys graduate, something that's on here and you can't purchase today will be usable and buyable at a comparable rate. But yeah, thanks so much, guys. Thank you.
So we have a couple of minutes, I think, left for questions, if we have any. Questions?
Hi.
Oh, there we go.
So, in this time, we have a lot of companies that are green.
Hang on a second, Gerald.
Yes.
Sorry, this is for the online people.
Nice.
So in this day and age, we have a lot of people that are greenwashing, are using social impact as a way to kind of cover the fact that they're not really doing a good job.
Yes.
How do we look out for that? How do we know when we're being duped?
Yes, excellent question. Yeah, I think, that's such a real possibility. I think one idea is just to demand more information. I mean, I know sometimes we are in a position to do that. I think the HPDs and labels are a great way, but often that only applies to certain kinds of products. Architectural products have to declare, they have to do HPDs, each EPDs, which are health product declarations or a declared label. But I think the question, I mean, the way as a designer and as a consumer, what we can do is just really ask a ton of questions and keep sort of relying on different and multiple resources to find out about the same product. So something that I didn't understand till a couple of weeks ago, in fact, was we keep hearing a lot of stuff about ocean plastic. Oh, these sneakers are made from ocean plastic, ocean plastic. Ocean plastic is not plastic that was pulled from the ocean. It's, I read like a bunch of different articles and I finally understood ocean plastic is plastic that would have ended up in the ocean and it was stopped in the middle. So it's not, buying that pair of sneakers isn't helping it isn't helping the dredging of plastic from the ocean. So I completely agree. There's so much greenwashing. I think multiple sources of information on the same thing. And I think as a designer, we do have the power to ask if there are a larger entity to say, I'm not going to specify this in a product until you give me an EPD, or you give me a full declaration of the ingredients, or it's hard sometimes because we're not in that position of power sometimes. But I think demanding more information helps, and then also keeping an eye out for those publicity sort of gimmicks, just kind of becoming wiser about them. I don't know if that helps, but I'm in the same boat as you.
We all are.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah, get my steps.
How do you deal with the affordability issue? Because oftentimes green products
Yes.
Cost a lot,
Yes.
and it doesn't really benefit everyone except
Yes.
for the higher up
Higher end,
tier
yes.
people.
Absolutely. Well, I think the first goal is to look out for some of these which are trying to be comparable, and I think there are enough product, whether maybe it's not that company, but it's something comparable, something local. There's enough happening to replace that. And the other thing is, there's a strong feeling that maybe we won't start using something that's 100% sustainable or something 100% green. We may end up using something that's made about 30% of a move, and that's okay for now because that's what we can access. And more, I think we're guiding companies. So say you're rolling out, 50,000 of some product. If you use something that is about halfway there and it fits into your price budget, price point as a company, that's still a way better move than something you did before. So I think it's baby steps, but also it is looking out for products all around the world, which can somewhat meet those needs. Maybe it's about changing design also a little bit to an extent, adapting it to something that's local and within budget. I think there's enough products out there that have some offerings similar to the ones that are super expensive. Yeah.
Do I? Yeah, exactly. This is it.
So another thing I noticed about the lack of green or biodegradable items is that people are not aware of solutions. Like we hear about the ocean full of plastic or the coral reefs drying, but we don't hear that there is a possibility of a solution or possible way to at least lessen up the damage that we're doing.
Yep.
How do you feel like we can probably push out more awareness for this?
I think it's a lot to do with, it helps to have some of the bigger brands hop on board, the brands that aren't necessarily producing materials, but the people who whose stuff we use every day. I don't know, the shopping, the Walmart. I think the more those companies hop on board and start to use them in a daily way. So if you have bioplastic shopping bags, and you don't just have bioplastic shopping bags, but you actually tell people how they're going to be used, that they're not supposed to be put in the recycling, because bioplastic things can actually damage a whole batch of recycling. I think it's going to start from the absolute simple everyday items, because in reality, not everyone has time to read articles about bioplastics and understand the difference, or something green. I think the more it gets into the absolute daily essentials, the things we start to do, the things we eat in the morning, the food packaging, the shopping places, I think that's going to be the start. And I'm really hoping that when companies like that really put those materials in use, that there's a strong kind of educational element where they're just not dispensing it as a marketing gimmick. They're actually telling you how to use it. I think someone was telling me recently, is it Trader Joe's or whatever? It was one of the big, I think, kind of shopping places was asking people to bring the packets back, because they knew for a fact that the packets were never going to make it successfully in the recycling system. They were going to cause damage. So there were strict instructions to bring them back. So the next time you did bring them back, you would get a benefit. Yeah, I think it was one of your students.
Yeah, Claire said that. Target.
Yeah. Was it Target? It was Target, yeah.
Target and Meijer both have like recycling bins for plastic bags, just like normal plastic bags. A lot of people throw them away, but if you recycle them in the normal recycling, it can mess up like the whole process. And
Yeah.
your recycling could turn into garbage.
Yeah. Same with the bioplastic as well, because as exciting as bioplastic looks, bioplastic doesn't actually compost in any conditions. Most bioplastic takes very specific conditions to actually degrade. And if you throw one bioplastic bag in a batch of recycling, it busts the whole system, because you can't treat it the same way. So I'm really hoping that it continues, and the daily sort of brands start there, and there's a strong educational component. But hopefully some of the companies that we're working with a consumer goods brand, a beauty brand, hopefully they're going to do that. They're going to put it into their packaging and stuff. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
I know you work with a lot of material designers, and even though you don't design the materials yourself, you see the process. So what kind of, well, it's a long process of designing it at first, and long process of testing it. But what kind of steps they're going through? It's a challenging process for a designer to go and say, I'm going to design material now, right?
Yeah.
So what's the process that you're seeing, and what is the leap, like when they start to try?
Yes, I think one of the cool things that we've having interacted with a number of different material designers is it looks like there's about 2 or 3 different paths. The first is an individual student who, as a graduation project, they explored this one material. There's a chance that they explored it for a while after that. They exhibited a couple of different products at a show, but they kind of stopped there. I think the next layer is a very successful sort of interdisciplinary team, and we found that where there's a team with a designer, someone from the engineering department, they have a mentor and a professional mentor, and I think those teams do really well because they have the bit of a skill set, and as a team they're sort of accountable to each other. For them, I think the leap happens when they get a sponsor or a large company to give them enough money to get equipment. Equipment is the biggest turning point we've seen, where I'll give you the example of the potato chips board guys. So these are guys who were essentially taking potato peels from restaurants. They were graduates from Kingston University, and they were taking potato peels and they were testing in them in their homes in extremely smelly conditions, because potato peels start to really stink after a while, guys. And they were essentially just turning that into these small boards. They got a little bit of sponsorship from an incubator. They started to test it out there, but for them, this huge leap happened when they made contact with a food products company in the UK. And the food products company said, okay, if we give you all of our potato peel waste, because we make frozen potato wedges, we'll give you all of that waste, and we'll give you £100,000 to buy your equipment to test it out. I think that's the moment. All the companies, I think, who have gone from individual or group to like an actual startup, it's been that moment where they found someone who was aligned with either their waste or the output, and then they leapfrogged into actual production. I think that's been an interesting path.
To add on that, I think it's good to mention that it's actually a 2-year-old company or something. They're very new. Like they haven't been in the field. I met with them last year in Milan.
They're kids. They're still very young.
They're your age. They're very young.
Yeah, they're very young. But it's called Chips Board. I encourage you to check it out. It's a great story, and I think a great kind of interesting trajectory. That's what's in.
Sort of a lighter question. Like some of the materials made from pollution and algae, do they have like an unexpected smell in their final state?
Great question. Funnily enough, it's not the ones that have the pollution or algae that actually smell. Something about the treatment process makes them so benign. It's the biomaterials that truly smell. So the mushroom mycelium materials or the grown materials, there's just a lot. You guys heading for a class. No worries, guys. Good luck with your class. Yeah. So yeah, it's mostly those. Thank you. I will wait for them. Yeah. Cool.
So I have one last one,
Yes.
if I can ask.
Yeah.
So for a lot of the students here who are either designing products or buildings or other objects and artifacts, one of the things, and you mentioned this at the beginning of your talk, that I found in practice frustrating was like, whenever there's a material decision to make, there's kind of okay, well, I'm so old. We go to the sweets catalog, and you'd open these giant things, and you turn to the ceiling, and it's like, all right, am I going to have a 2x2 acoustical ceiling tile or a 2x4, right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, now that with the the access that they have to the internet, they can find anything, which is pretty amazing. But still, one of the hindrances, or one of the things that I think holds us back as designers, is that many of these products aren't then tested for underwriters' laboratories or some other certification. So, we can't just go put mushroom panels on this wall because this is a fire-rated wall. So I guess it's not as much a question, more of a comment, but maybe something I was thinking about as you spoke, that for us to be able to progress the discipline of design further, I feel like we need a way that these certifications can be funded or something over others, because it takes a lot of money to do that. So I don't know what the answer is, but have you found any groups that have figured that out?
You really hit the nail on the head, because there's so many people we've seen that it's kind of on the cusp of being implemented. It's an exciting time, but it's the expectations from a real-time project are that it will need those certifications. Otherwise, the project won't be cleared for inspection. It needs all those things. I think we are seeing more and more. Hopefully, those entities that give funding at the strategic moment, they're able to fund at least some testing, so that they're able to enhance production or develop it further. But it is a huge kind of blockage in here.
It just seems like an opportunity for municipalities or governmental organizations to fast track and either discount or fund the testing of these products, because we have to. We're not in a position anymore that we have a choice.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. I think, so there's one program which I do think is interesting. The Mayor of London has a prize, which I think some of it is supposed to go towards, like when you kind of pitch your product, and the money that they give, which is a fairly large sum, I think there's a rider that it has to be dedicated towards testing and implementation. So hopefully more things like that, where maybe we multiply the number of different things, or maybe there's a subsidized rate for certification, or there's a natural inbuilt certification element. But I couldn't agree more. It's the biggest hurdle of all, and a justified hurdle, because they're not there yet. They're not certified. Yeah.
I also need to add on that. I think the natural way they sold it, if any of these materials shown in a trade show, they have to get certified to be able to show it in that environment. They have to be fire certified, or like they have to get health and safety pass.
Kind of thing.
So I think if they hit that point that they're showcasing their work, they're already. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing. Yeah, I guess we don't put them out there. Our collection would be very diminished at these shows.
How do you show half of your?
We wouldn't show them, but we'd show some. We'd only show the things which people could actually pick up and use. So yes and no. I see it. I see it. Yeah. Fine, guys. Anyone else? Any questions? Anyone else?
Well, thank you very much.
Thank
It was a
you.
great lecture.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks.